My name is Barbara Jowers, and I'm 29 years old. If you had asked me 6 months ago what my relationship looked like, I would have described it as solid, stable, comfortable. I would have told you Mason and I had grown together, that moving in after 1 year felt natural, that 4 years together had turned us into a dependable, almost seamless pair. I genuinely believed that. Or maybe I needed to believe it because the truth was quieter, more subtle, and far more humiliating. Looking back now, the red flags weren't even red. They were neon. They buzzed. They practically lit up entire rooms. Mason used to joke that he was bad at adulting, laughing it off like it was some harmless, quirky personality trait. Whenever he said it, he'd lean into me smirking and call me his organizational genius, his walking reminder app, or the worst one, his brain. That one stung more than I ever admitted. At first, I told myself it was cute. I liked being helpful. I liked feeling needed. But somewhere between managing his doctor's appointments, creating spreadsheets for our grocery budget, paying every bill, handling the rent signing, every lease renewal, organizing our repairs, and doing anything even remotely bureaucratic, I realized something that hurt far more than it should have. Mason didn't see me as his partner. I was the infrastructure of his life, a structure he enjoyed, a structure he depended on, a structure he absolutely took for granted. The breaking point wasn't some dramatic betrayal or even a massive fight. It was one simple request. It was a Thursday. My workday had been relentless, back-to-back meetings, delayed lunch, and a last-minute client emergency. But before I left the apartment that morning, I'd asked Mason only one thing. Please call the landlord about the dishwasher. It's still not working. The dishwasher had been dead for 3 days. I'd handled it for years. This one time, I needed him to take over. Just one phone call. When I walked in that evening, exhausted and starving, I found Mason sprawled across the couch, scrolling through TikTok with the enthusiasm of a teenager avoiding homework. The dishwasher door hung open exactly as I'd left it, the same faint smell of stale water lingering in the air. My heart dropped. He didn't even look up at first. Only when I spoke softly, because I was still hoping for the best, did he glance over his shoulder. Oh, hey Barb. I stared at the dishwasher. You didn't call. He blinked like the thought was brand new information. Oh, right. I forgot. I didn't speak. I didn't trust myself to. Then he added, besides, you're better at talking to him anyway. Something inside me shifted. Cleanly. Quietly. Permanently. I wasn't angry yet, just numb. Mason, it was one call. He finally sat up, defensive already. Why are you making this such a big deal? Because it's never just one call, I said. You never handle anything. I do all of it. Bills, appointments, budgeting, scheduling, repairs, groceries, everything. He scoffed. I work too. You work part-time at your friend's boutique, I said. My voice didn't rise, but I felt a tremble beneath it. And yes, you contribute money, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about life management, responsibility, partnership. That word partnership should have anchored us. Instead, Mason flinched like I'd insulted him. Oh, sorry, I'm not perfect like you, Barbara, he snapped, rolling his eyes. Sorry, I don't have spreadsheets for every boring thing in life. I'm not asking for spreadsheets, I said. I'm asking for help. His expression hardened. Something ugly flashed across his face. You know what? Whatever. I don't need you anyway. The sentence felt like someone slid a blade beneath my ribs, slow, deliberate, and meant to wound. I swallowed the pain because showing it would have made everything worse. You don't need me, I repeated. I was fine before you. I'll be fine after. You think you're so important, you're not. You're just convenient. Convenient. Not loved, not valued, not appreciated. Convenient. That word changed the temperature of the room. My breath tightened. My eyes burned not with tears but clarity. Prove it, I said. Mason blinked. What? You said you don't need me, I repeated. Prove it. Let's break up. Let's see how fine you'll be. He laughed, a short, brittle burst of disbelief. Fine. Watch me thrive without you micromanaging my life. He tossed clothes into a duffel bag without folding them, grabbed his charger, and left without looking back. Within 20 minutes, he posted an Instagram story with some inspirational quote about new beginnings, tagged his best friend, and added a smiling selfie. It was all so performative, it made my stomach churn. But as the door clicked shut behind him, the apartment went painfully silent. I sat on the edge of the couch because if I allowed myself to sit back fully, I feared I would crumble into a sob that wouldn't stop. The pain was real, raw, and jagged, but beneath it, something else stirred. Not relief, not satisfaction. Resolve. If he wanted to believe he didn't need me, then I wouldn't stop him. I wouldn't chase, wouldn't plead, wouldn't negotiate. I wouldn't do anything except the one thing he never expected: nothing. I would stop doing everything I normally did. All of it. He would experience the life he swore he could handle. He would learn what partnership truly meant by living without one. He would learn what convenience really cost when it disappeared. I boxed his belongings, neatly labeled each item, and set them aside. I emailed the landlord to let him know Mason had moved out. I changed the locks since Mason never bothered signing the lease in the first place, and I sat there in the quiet apartment, finally allowing myself a deep, shaky breath. I wasn't planning revenge. I wasn't even planning anything dramatic. I was simply giving Mason exactly what he asked for. He wanted to be independent. He wanted to prove he didn't need me, and I was going to let him. The morning after Mason left the apartment felt unnaturally still. His absence wasn't peaceful or relieving. It was empty, like a hum that had been in my ears for 4 years had suddenly gone silent. I expected sadness to hit me like a tidal wave. Instead, I felt something closer to exhaustion. Not the physical kind, but the deep, bone-level weariness of someone who has carried far too much for far too long. I made myself coffee, sat at the table, and looked around at the life I had built with someone who apparently believed I was nothing more than convenient. It hurt, yes, but beneath that pain was a steady clarity. This wasn't just a breakup. This was a reset. And I was about to watch a man try to live a life he never had to manage himself. The first step was practical. Mason wasn't on the lease. For years, I had asked him to put his name on the renewal forms, but he always forgot. So this time, I emailed the landlord, explained the breakup, and requested a lock change. He responded quickly and came by that afternoon. By the time he left, Mason no longer had access to the apartment he assumed would always be available to him. Next, I boxed up his things neatly, carefully, even labeling each container. It felt strangely symbolic, like packing away versions of myself I wouldn't need anymore. When everything was ready, I texted him, "You have 30 days to arrange pickup. Boxes are in the front closet. Let me know when you want to come by." He didn't respond. Instead, he posted, constantly, photos of brunches, laughing selfies with his friends, captions like, "Freedom feels good" and "New chapter." A curated image of a man thriving if you didn't look too closely. I tried not to look at all, until the first crack appeared. It was Tuesday, 2 a.m. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number, except it wasn't unknown. Mason had simply switched to his friend's Wi-Fi because his phone data was apparently gone. "Mason, hey Barb. Netflix isn't working. Did you change the password?" I stared at the screen for a long moment. Of all the possible things he could say to me after leaving, this was his opening line. "Netflix? Me, it's my account. You said you don't need me, remember?" He replied almost instantly. "Mason. Are you serious, Barbara? Don't be petty. Just give me the new password." "Me, no. You'll be fine without it. You're thriving, right?" That ended the conversation, if you could call it that. But he sent 19 more texts over the next hour. Most were variations of "wow," or "you're unbelievable," or "so immature." I didn't respond to a single one. By Wednesday, the tone shifted completely. "Mason, my phone got shut off. I thought you paid it this month." I closed my eyes. Of course. I had always paid his phone bill. Because if I didn't, it wouldn't get paid at all. Me, I pay my phone bill. Yours was due on the 15th. You always handled that. Mason. No, you always handled that. Can you just pay it and I'll pay you back? Me, no. You can call them and set up your own account. Then, Mason. This is messed up. I'm struggling here. Me. We broke up. Remember you said you don't need me. Another stretch of silence. Another round of his friends posting thinly veiled jabs online about fake independent women who crumble without attention. Mason clearly wasn't telling them the full story, or he believed his own version. Then Friday came. It was a beautiful day, sunny warm with that early spring brightness that makes everything look lighter. I was enjoying my lunch break at work when my phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. Normally I'd let it go to voicemail, but something nudged me to answer. A shaky breath, then Mason's voice. "Barbara, it's me. Can we talk?" The desperation in his tone surprised me. "What do you need, Mason? I can't access the bank account." "Which one?" "Our account," he said, and I almost laughed. "Mason, we don't have a joint account." "You mean my account? The one I let you use my card for?" Silence on the other end. Then very softly, "I need money. Becca's getting tired of me not contributing." I kept my voice calm, level. "Sounds like a you problem." "Barbara, please, I can't open a new account yet." "Why not?" "I don't have enough money for the minimum deposit." "And whose fault is that?" "What do you want me to do?" he snapped. "I'm trying here." "Try harder." He exhaled in frustration, a sharp, angry sound. I can't believe you're doing this after 4 years. I'm not doing anything I said. I'm just not doing everything anymore. You wanted to prove you don't need me. I'm giving you that chance. He hung up. That should have been the end of it. But 2 hours later, a mutual friend texted me with a screenshot Mason had attempted to go back to the apartment. He tried the old key, and when it didn't work, he apparently had a meltdown in the hallway, loud enough that the building manager had to come out and ask him to leave. I shouldn't have felt satisfaction. I shouldn't have felt anything but sadness. Instead, I felt something darkly honest validation. Because the story didn't stop there. He reached out to multiple mutual friends, some to borrow money, others to complain that I had abandoned him. Of course, he forgot to mention he had declared he didn't need me, or that he had walked out, or that I had been the one carrying both our lives on my back. But those lies didn't matter. Reality was catching up to him faster than he could outrun it. And I could feel it, the shift, the unraveling, the beginning of consequences he never imagined would touch him. Mason had stepped into the real world without training wheels for the first time in his adult life, and the cracks in his independence were becoming fractures. Soon they would become a collapse. The thing about people like Mason, people who've coasted through life carried by others, is that when the support disappears, they don't stumble. They plummet. I didn't realize how fast it would happen, not at first. I imagined weeks of mild chaos, maybe the occasional frantic text, possibly a tearful voicemail. Something dramatic, sure, but gradual. Instead, it was as if every neglected responsibility in Mason's life had been waiting behind a dam, and the dam broke the moment I stepped away. The first major hit came the following Monday. I was getting ready for work when my phone buzzed with a message from our mutual friend Lacey. Lacey, did you hear about Mason? I hadn't. I braced myself. Me, what now? A moment later, she sent a voice note. I played it expecting gossip. Instead, I heard pure chaos, Lacey whispering like she was hiding in a bathroom recounting the scene she'd just watched unfold. Apparently, Mason had gone to the bank to open his own account. Straightforward. Except he didn't know his login for the mobile banking app, couldn't remember his password. Didn't have certain identification documents because I used to keep them organized in the filing cabinet. And this was the kicker. He didn't know his own security questions. For years, he'd just handed me his phone with some breezy, "Can you do it?" and I'd handled everything from online payments to resetting passwords. He never even asked how things worked. Hearing all that, I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt embarrassed. Embarrassed that I'd enabled someone to be this unprepared for adulthood. Still, I tried to shake it off. I had a full day ahead. I didn't want to think about Mason. But life wasn't done with him yet. That afternoon, while I was in a meeting, another message came in, this time from building management. Hi, Barbara. Just letting you know, your ex-partner tried accessing the unit again, using an old key. We informed him the locks were changed and told him to leave. He became emotional in the hallway. Everything is under control. Just keeping you updated. I read the message 3 times, trying to picture it. Mason frustrated and panicking, shaking a key that no longer fit, realizing he no longer had access to a life he'd taken for granted. Part of me felt guilty. The other part felt strangely lighter, like I'd stepped out from under a shadow I didn't know I'd been living in. That night, Mason tried calling me 5 times. I let each call ring through. When he finally texted, the tone was completely different from the angry entitlement he'd shown before. Mason, I need help. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then another came, seconds later. Mason, please. Becca kicked me out for not paying her back for groceries. I don't have anywhere to stay. My fingers hovered over the screen, but I didn't type anything. Not yet. Mason, Barbara, please answer. I'm serious. I'm scared. Guilt twisted in my chest. Not because I wanted him back, not even close, but because this was a level of collapse I hadn't expected so soon. Still, I reminded myself of the truth he left. He said he didn't need me. He said I was convenient. I wasn't abandoning him. I was simply stepping out of the caretaker role he'd forced on me. I put my phone down and went to sleep. By morning, everything had escalated again. This time the text came from someone I never expected, Mason's mother. Hi, Barbara. I'm so sorry to bother you. We are trying to sort things out. Do you have any idea where Mason kept his insurance papers or his car registration? He doesn't seem to know. Of course he didn't. I used to handle everything with his car renewals insurance, paying the occasional ticket he forgot to mention. A heaviness settled over me. They're in his blue folder. I packed it in one of the boxes. It's labeled Box 3. Mason's mom. Thank you, and I'm sorry he's been bothering you. This has been a wake-up call for him. It was strangely validating to hear that from her, like someone had finally seen the dynamic I'd been drowning in. But the real wake-up call for all of us hadn't even happened yet. The next day, as I was leaving work, my phone rang with another unknown number. Hesitant, I answered. Hello, a stern voice. Is this Barbara Jowers? Yes. This is Officer Ramirez with the City Police Department. We're calling regarding a person you may know, Mason Hawthorne. My stomach dropped. What happened? He was pulled over earlier today for a broken taillight, the officer explained. During the stop, we discovered his driver's license is suspended due to an unpaid speeding ticket. His registration is expired, and his insurance has lapsed. The vehicle was impounded. Oh my God, I breathed. Mason is currently in custody. He asked us to contact his emergency number. You're listed as his first point of contact. Of course I was. He never updated anything. I'm no longer with him, I said quietly. There was a pause. Then the officer softened. Understood. We've informed him. We just needed to verify the situation. I hope he figures things out, I said. I meant it even if it felt complicated. After we hung up, I sat in my car for nearly 10 minutes processing everything. Mason had been arrested, because of responsibilities he'd ignored. Responsibilities I had handled for 4 years. He was unraveling, and there was nothing I could or should do to stop it. Later that night, another message came from Lacey. Lacey. So Becca didn't bail Mason out until the next morning. He missed a shift at the boutique. They fired him. I sank back against my pillows, staring at the ceiling. 4 years. 4 years of planning his appointments, paying his tickets, calling his insurance, making sure he woke up on time, handling every adult responsibility he couldn't be bothered to learn. And now without me, his life had collapsed in less than 2 weeks. He wasn't thriving. He wasn't even functioning. He was living the consequences he had always believed he was safe from because I was there to shield him. But the truth was clearer than ever. Mason's chaos had never been random. It was a system he relied on, a system named Barbara. And now that system was gone. For almost a month after Mason's arrest and firing, everything went strangely quiet. No midnight texts, no guilt trips, no attempts to show up at my workplace. It was as if he'd simply vanished into the background of his own life, forced to finally confront responsibilities he had avoided for years. I should have felt relieved, and I did in part, but quiet isn't always peaceful. Sometimes it's an omen. Sometimes it's a breath someone takes before they try one last time to pull you back into the orbit you worked so hard to escape. Still, I told myself Mason was learning, or maybe he was too busy drowning to call out for help. Then, one Tuesday evening, while I was preparing dinner after an exhausting day, my phone buzzed with a text from an unfamiliar number. Hey Barbara, it's Mason. Can we talk? I've been thinking a lot. I froze the knife halfway through a carrot. For a moment, I just stared at the words like my phone had betrayed me. I almost deleted the message without replying. My first instinct was to protect my peace, to keep the distance I had fought so hard to create. But curiosity is a powerful enemy, especially when it's tied to someone who once shaped your daily life. I didn't answer immediately. I walked away from the phone, continued chopping vegetables, put water on the stove. But my mind wasn't in the kitchen anymore. It was running through every possible version of this conversation: apology, manipulation, desperation, or something worse. 20 minutes later, another message arrived. I'm not trying to start anything. I need to say some things. Not to get you back, just to say them. Could we meet public place, coffee shop, coffee? He added 10 minutes of your time. That's all I'm asking. I sat down at the table, suddenly drained. I didn't owe him a meeting. I didn't owe him closure. But something in the wording, the quietness of it, the lack of anger or entitlement felt different. For months, I'd been wrestling with anger and sadness and disbelief. Part of me realized a conversation might actually give me something I hadn't had since the day he yelled, "You're just convenient," the final release, the clean break. Against my better judgment, I replied, "Okay, tomorrow. 4 p.m. Starbucks on 8th. 10 minutes. His response was immediate. Thank you, really. The next day I arrived 10 minutes early because anxiety had driven me out of the house sooner than planned. The Starbucks was moderately busy, filled with the familiar hum of espresso machines and low conversations. I chose a table near the window, visible, open, unthreatening. When Mason walked in, I barely recognized him. His hair looked unwashed, swept into a messy style that didn't resemble his usual carefully groomed look. He wore a stretched-out hoodie, faded sweatpants, and sneakers with scuffed edges. His face was pale eyes sunken with exhaustion. This was not the curated, selfie-ready version he'd been posting online at the beginning of our breakup. He hesitated when he saw me, then walked over with a timid, almost guilty smile. "Barbara," he said quietly. "Mason." He sat down like someone who wasn't sure the chair would hold his weight. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he released a long, shaky breath. "Thank you for coming. I know you didn't have to." "You said you had something to say," I replied, keeping my tone neutral, if stern. He nodded, stared at his hands, then looked up at me. His voice cracked slightly when he began. "I'm sorry." The words hung in the air heavier than I expected. He didn't rush. He didn't perform. He just let them exist. "For what specifically?" I asked. I needed to hear him say it. Not a vague apology, not a blanket statement. "For everything." He swallowed. "For treating you like a parent instead of a partner. For dumping responsibility on you because it was easier. For acting like your effort was just part of the background instead of the thing that kept my life from falling apart." I didn't speak, so he continued. "I said terrible things. I called you convenient. I said I didn't need you, and I didn't mean any of it. I was angry, defensive, immature, and honestly stupid." He stared out the window for a moment, gathering himself. "You know I had to go to therapy," he said. "Court mandated after the arrest." I nodded slightly. He went on. "My therapist made me write a list of everything I relied on you for. Every single thing. It ended up being 3 pages long. 3 full pages." He laughed, but it was an embarrassed, self-loathing laugh, not a dismissive one. I didn't even know how to check my credit score, or how my insurance worked, or when my registration was due, or God, how to schedule my own doctor's appointment. I didn't even know my own security questions, Barbara. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Do you know how humiliating that is?" "I know," I said quietly, "because I handled it all." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, and I didn't appreciate it. I didn't even try to learn. I thought it made me quirky, you know. Cute, helpless Mason. Bad at adulting. I wore it like a badge instead of seeing it for what it was, a massive problem." He rubbed his face with both hands. His voice softened further. "I didn't realize how much you did until I had to face all of it alone. And I wasn't ready. I wasn't capable. And that's not your fault. That's mine." He paused, then asked in a small, almost fragile voice, "Why did you stay, if it was this bad?" I stared at him for a long moment. The truth was painful, but I owed it to myself. "Because I loved you," I said. "I kept hoping you'd step up, that you'd want to be my partner instead of my responsibility. I thought if I helped you enough, supported you enough, eventually you'd learn to stand beside me instead of on me." He nodded, tears gathering in his eyes. "I really did think relationships worked that way," he said. Like having someone take care of you, like having a parent." "It doesn't," I said softly. "I know," he whispered. "I know that now." Silence settled between us. Real silence. Not defensive, not hostile, just honest. After a moment, he asked, "The guy you're seeing now, does he take care of his own life?" "He does," I said. "He handles his responsibilities without expecting someone else to carry them for him." Mason nodded again. "Good. You deserve that." He stood slowly, gathering his courage before speaking one last time. "For what it's worth, Barbara, you weren't convenient. I was just too immature to know the difference between love and dependence, and now I have to live with that." He walked out of the cafe without looking back. I didn't call after him. I didn't cry. I just watched him leave, feeling a strange mix of sorrow, relief, and something close to freedom. He had finally understood, and I had finally let go. For days after the Starbucks meeting, I replayed the conversation in my head. Not because I was tempted to go back, those feelings had dissolved long before he apologized, but because the emotional weight of hearing him finally understand the truth lingered in my chest, like something both heavy and freeing. It was surreal to witness a version of Mason I had never met in our 4 years together, accountable, reflective, humbled. And while that recognition didn't erase what happened, it did close a wound I'd been pretending wasn't there. Life didn't slow down after that. If anything, it began moving at a pace I hadn't experienced in years, light, steady, balanced. For the first time in a long time, I had mental space, emotional space, the kind of space that lets you rediscover yourself. I started waking earlier, not because I had to juggle someone else's responsibilities, but because I finally had the energy to enjoy my own mornings. I spent long, quiet hours reading on weekends, cooking meals for myself, instead of planning everything around another person's preferences and reconnecting with friends I hadn't had the bandwidth to see. Work shifted too. Without the constant distraction of managing Mason's life, paying his forgotten bills, organizing his schedule, reminding him about shifts or deadlines. I found myself excelling again. I was more focused, more grounded, more present. My boss noticed. A few weeks after the apology, I received a promotion I'd been hoping for but had quietly given up on. And then there was someone else, someone new. His name was Evan. We'd known each other casually, through work-friendly hallway smiles, shared small talk in the break room. After my breakup, I kept my distance from anything romantic. I didn't want to fall into another dynamic where I became someone's caretaker instead of their partner. But Evan was different from the start. He was the kind of man who planned his own appointments, managed his own finances, and didn't treat basic life skills like optional extra credit assignments. He didn't need me to fix or manage or guide him. He simply wanted to know me. That was new, and it felt good. When we planned our first weekend trip together, I braced myself for the old pattern, the one where I booked everything, made checklists, coordinated details while my partner coasted. But Evan handled his half without being asked. Booked the hotel, sent me confirmation screenshots, asked what I preferred for activities, checked reviews, packed responsibly. It was such a small thing objectively, but to me it felt revolutionary. It felt like partnership. The night before our trip, as I scrolled through photos of our hotel, my phone buzzed with a message from Lacey. Lacey, just an update on Mason if you care. He's different now, like actually trying. I debated ignoring it. Curiosity won. Me, different how? After a few moments, she replied with several long paragraphs. Messy, hurried, but honest. She told me Mason was working 2 jobs, retail during the day, waitering in the evenings. He'd moved back in with his parents but paid rent. He'd enrolled in a financial literacy program at the community center. He'd even started therapy, beyond the court-mandated sessions. He was still struggling emotionally, financially, practically, but he was confronting things he once avoided with the ease of someone who always had a buffer. He and I hadn't spoken since Starbucks, and I didn't plan to, but hearing that he was genuinely trying left me with an unexpected feeling, not pride, not affection, but a soft, distant respect. Growth wasn't my responsibility anymore, but I could acknowledge it from afar. Still, I had to ask, me, why are you telling me? Her answer was simple. Lacey. Because you carried that man for 4 years. He's finally learning how to walk. I put my phone down, letting the words sink in. For 4 years, I had mistaken caretaking for love, mistaken responsibility for devotion, mistaken exhaustion for commitment. I had accepted a dynamic that starved me of partnership, believing that supporting someone meant sacrificing myself. But the truth was clearer now than it had ever been. Real love doesn't ask you to shrink. Real partnership doesn't require you to disappear so someone else can function. And real growth, real lasting growth, never comes from shielding someone from consequences. It only comes when you stop catching their fall and let them hit the ground they've been ignoring. The morning Evan and I left for our trip, I woke up to a calm I hadn't felt in years. Not the absence of worry, but the presence of peace. We drove with the windows down, music playing softly, sunlight cutting across the dashboard. At a red light, I glanced at him and thought, this is what it feels like to breathe. Later that evening, sitting on the balcony of our hotel, Evan leaned back in his chair sipping tea. You good? He asked, his voice easy, steady. I am, I said, and I meant it. My old life, the chaos, the caretaking, the exhaustion felt impossibly distant now, like something I had dreamt rather than lived. And in its place was something new, something balanced, something mine. But the truth is, Mason still appeared in my thoughts, sometimes not with longing, not even with anger, but with reflection. His apology had been real. His collapse had been necessary. His journey was long overdue. He had said he didn't need me. For years he believed that. And losing me had finally forced him to see the truth of his dependence not just on me, but on the avoidance patterns he'd used to navigate adulthood. But the greater truth, the one I had been too busy carrying him to see, was that I didn't need him. I never had. I had simply wanted love so badly I accepted a version of it that drained me. And now, standing on the balcony with a man who met me where I stood, instead of dragging me backwards, I finally understood the deeper lesson in all of this. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's letting people face the consequences of their own choices. It's allowing them to fail to struggle to learn the hard way. It's stepping back and letting the universe deliver what you no longer will. Mason said I was convenient. He was wrong. But more importantly, he needed to be wrong because if he hadn't collapsed, if he hadn't fallen apart, if he hadn't hit the lowest point of his life, he never would have learned the difference between dependence and love. And if I hadn't stepped away, I never would have learned the difference between carrying someone and choosing someone. I didn't root for him. I didn't cheer for him. But I was glad quietly, distantly, that he was finally growing up. Because that's what happens when someone confuses a partner with a parent. Eventually, the parent leaves, the partner disappears, and you're forced to learn how to stand on your own 2 feet. And when you do, when you finally stop leaning on someone else, you discover who you really